Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for coming along and joining us this fine Wednesday evening here in the UK, or afternoon, or even potentially, could it still be morning? I think it's very early morning in Australia, New Zealand as well. But wherever you're watching from, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I really do appreciate it. Tonight we're having a little bit of a low-key, relaxed live stream from the point of view that we are running through a live Q&A. So if you have any questions regarding the channel, anything drones, drone regs, anything at all, just want our opinion on something, then tag at Geeksvana in the live chat, and producer will be pulling out some questions to be able to ask as well. We do have some from the pre-chat as well. We've got some from the recent video comments, and also lots of emails which are coming recently. So I thought, as there were so many questions outstanding, it might be fun to have a bit of a live stream, but also get our specific category editor, Opinion Graham, who's joining us tonight as well, who I'll bring in right now, in fact. How are you, sir?
Hello, very well, thank you. Yeah, I think this is my first Q&A, isn't it?
I think it might
be. We've had Q&As at the end of
yes.
stuff, but this is the first formal Q&A, and I think it sort of reflects some of the things we've been seeing in various social media groups and the like over the last week or so, and it sort of felt right, didn't it?
It did. It always feels right with you, Graham, frankly, but there we go. Now we do have something new and exciting this in today's show. We have in the background working hard is Will, our producer Will, and he's actually going to be asking the questions this evening, and also pulling your, as I said earlier, pulling your questions out of the live chat as well. So you'll be hearing his voice popping in and out of the show from time to time. Will, how are you?
Hello everyone. Yes, luckily I get to hide behind no video, just the voice for these little streams, but I'll be here trying to keep things moving. You guys don't talk too much. I'll here to skip on to the next question, so keep everything running smoothly. But I'm very much new to the drone world, but I've been working in Notion for a little while now, and it's been great. It's nice to get stuck in.
Will is the new production manager for the channel, who's been helping me out whilst the business side of things has been growing fairly well this year. So we've needed some extra help on the channel. So Will is helping to bring up some really cool content that's coming up. Actually, and we've got some very exciting projects that we can't talk about yet, but it's been fun working on them, hasn't it, so far?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's going to be a good summer. There's a lot of things we've got bubbling under at the moment.
Exactly. Bubbling under is a very good description, actually, I have to say. Right. So I think we'll get straight into the questions, because we have a lot of them to get through this evening. Just very quickly before we do that, though, I want to say hi to a couple of our members who are putting their free member chat into the chat. Andy Cortez, member for 33 months. Thank you, Andy. Really appreciate it. 3 months until he gets his t-shirt. Yes, we've just had the channel members will know on the community tab. We've just released the new symbol. You can see after Andy's name in the chat there, he's got the little 24 symbol, which means he's been a member for more than 24 months. Well, the 36 one has now been launched, and anyone hitting 36 months will actually get a free commemorative t-shirt, which actually has some special branding on there as well. And Johnny DRC, who's been a member for 18 months. Hi, Johnny. Great to see you, sir. Hope you're very well. And Legwork has been a member for 30 months. Thank you. You're getting there as well. And Andy Cortez has just gifted 5 Geeksvana memberships. Andy, you really shouldn't, but thank you very much. And those have gone to Lambo. Hi, good to see you. He's often somebody who watches the channel. PG, congratulations. Flying Drones with Scoob, James Emery, and Minty FPV. Those are the people that the YouTube chat has randomly selected to receive those gift memberships very kindly from Andy Cortez. Well, thank you, Andy. Anyone who does become a new member,
I feel very much like the baby here, Sean. I've only been a member for a week, I think.
well, that's the irony there, isn't it? Of course, because Graham is helping me on a couple of the tiers, the open for business and the very specific network, which is obviously, as you might realize, is for these specific category flyers. And it's an interesting one, because although Graham's producing content, he had to become a member to be able to watch the content on the channel. There isn't a way of allowing a co-host or a contributor to have access to memberships for free, which is a slightly strange one, but there we go. But yes, so I'm really looking forward to this evening, and should we crack on with some questions, Will?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we've got a lot to get through today, guys. There's we've had questions coming in through emails, we've got comments, a few, like you said, a few in the chat have been dropping in some questions. Feel free to drop them in as we go as well. But we're going to start off today with one from George, who emailed us in, and this one relates maybe a little bit to that recent video you had on the National Trust. Starts off saying he's a big fan of the channel, loves everything that you do. And after watching the National Trust video, it's got him thinking, do the same rules apply to English heritage sites, in particular Stonehenge? He goes on to say, now he knows he can't take off and land on English heritage grounds, but can he be on a nearby public space and, fly over it, essentially?
Yeah. Okay.
And he's saying there's a few no-fly zones, maybe in the north and east area. But if he stays clear of those, could he conduct a lawful flight at Stonehenge?
Yes, is the answer. Is the very simple answer. They won't all be as simple as that. This is a really good question actually, because I've had this comment, and did you say it was from George?
Yes,
thank you, George, for asking that question. It's an interesting one, because I have had this sort of actually, what about this land? And well, the National Trust thing was confirming their policy, but essentially their policy is now in line with British law and with drone regulations, and it essentially is the same in terms of what any other landowner can do. So very much the same with English heritage, that they don't actively want you to be flying your recreational drones above their sites, etc., and that type of thing. But as long as you take off and land in at a location you're able to legally, then there's nothing to stop you flying over them. It's also interesting as well that he does take into account the flight restriction zones, because I don't think many people often check just how close, and sometimes I see the odd angle of a photograph or the odd angle of a video. I don't know if you agree, Graham, and I think, are they the wrong side of Stonehenge? Because there is actually, flight restriction wise, there is a wrong side of Stonehenge.
There is, yeah. You need to check it carefully. And actually, I think on that I'm not going to check now, but I think on one of the sort of semi-official maps, it's sort of a little bit wrong in that it's a timed NOTAM. It's done by NOTAM, isn't it? I think the south is done by NOTAM, I believe. And therefore it's not sort of restricted all the time, but it sort of shows as though it is. So you do have to be careful. And of course, the other thing with English heritage or National Trust is the possibility of crowds, particularly as you get to holiday season, any big attractions.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
early morning, late evening, get the golden hour.
Exactly. And it is a really important thing to stress that just because you can fly doesn't necessarily mean you should fly. You need to assess it at all times, from the point of view that it's a location that unless it's golden hour and that type of thing, then and you're there at 7 o'clock in the morning and the place isn't even open yet, etc., there are probably going to be people around. So it is definitely one to keep an ear on, frankly. Excellent. Okay, well that was a good starter. Thank you, George, for asking that question. What's up next, Will?
Yeah, well, that was a lot more in depth than I thought. There's a lot more to that than I thought.
Welcome to the world of drones.
Quite interesting. Yes, yeah. I can see where this is going. Next up, we've got a channel member. We've got Peter. He's asking, if I buy a Mavic 3 Pro, where can I fly it with my A2 CofC? And does my FPV UK membership expand that at all?
I will answer the second bit first, because the first bit is actually a bit of an in-depth one that both myself and Graham have been discussing for quite a few days, since the formal announcement of the Mavic 3 Pro coming out with its C2 label. So the FPV UK membership side of things, yes, it does, although you now have access, Peter, to the Article 16 authorization, which if you read the terms and conditions and follow the guidelines that FPV UK set out to use, that basically means that you can fly from parks and areas which are predominantly used for leisure, and so things like beaches, etc., even if they are within congested areas, you have to stay within the volume, the air volume of that location. So you can't take off from a park and fly out across the city. It can only be recreational flights. There's a few stipulations. It's a 30-meter separation from uninvolved people, which of course, if you is actually technically better than the A2 CFC that you hold, but of course it is restricted to leisure locations only, and you can have takeoff and landing within 15 meters if you take mitigation, and that mitigation can essentially be somebody stood with you to ensure that nobody comes within that area and that it doesn't become any kind of danger there. So that's that part. So do you have anything to say on the Article 16 side of things, Graham, before we move on to the first part?
No, I think we should dive into the A2 CFC, and essentially that little C2 badge on there means nothing in the UK. Yes. So essentially you are limited to or you're limited by the weight of the drone, which happens to be just over 900 grams, but it could be anything up to just under 2 kilos and above 500 grams, and that would place it in that sort of area, that range where you've got yes. to say 50 meters horizontally from uninvolved people. You can bring them under your control if you can manage that. So if you're looking to work with that, for instance, then you may be limited to quiet industrialized areas, perhaps commercial parks in quiet times of the day. City centres, probably not, because you've got a 100-metre diameter to take care of in terms of making sure uninvolved people aren't going to come in. So actually, for that, it's probably not feasible.
No, exactly, and it's essentially in the UK at the moment. Ignore any C labels that you see on drones. It means absolutely nothing. It was going to, it should have, etc. It could again in the future, but I don't want to complicate things with necessarily talking about whether that's going to happen or not. We have an open category investigation coming up, which I know is actually one of the questions, so I won't delve into it too much now, which is going to involve public consultation from the UK CAA, and they're looking into all of this side of things again. But because we didn't have the bodies in place to be able to actually essentially administer the C labels for the UK, we can't use them here. So those C labels are for the EASA system, not the UK system. Even though we, of course, because we adopted those rules because we've mirrored them, they are essentially the same. We need to have those bodies in place and everything as well, which we don't have. So anything you're flying at the moment is a legacy aircraft, basically. So as Graham quite rightly says, it's 50-meter horizontal separation, but of course you are able to fly within congested areas with the A2 CFC. Yeah. Which is the main benefit that will give you. Now, you will notice at the moment, and I understand that this is a technical issue due to the way that the law was sort of changed at the last minute, or wasn't changed or worded, or whatever complex sort of issue was happening behind the scenes. But on the back of A2 CFC cards being issued by RAE right now, it still says that you can fly a C2 drone with the reduced separation distances, etc. Now that is not the case, and it's something we've raised with the CAA, and we understand they are looking into it, but that is not the case. So essentially ignore C labels at the moment.
Essentially, of course you can fly a C2 drone, but you can only fly it against the regulations which say 50 meters, and you don't have those additional reduced clearances that we would have if we had the class system. So yeah, you can fly them, do what you like, fill your boots, but you still got to stick to that 50-meter horizontal, I'm afraid.
Exactly. So hopefully that helps you. It has caused a bit of a confusion.
Do you mind? No. Do you mind if I just say, if you are flying in EASA territories, so those covered by EASA, and if you happen to have the A2 CFC equivalent for those territories, then you can follow those EASA regulations if you have a C mark drone. So if you've got a C1 mark drone, you can fly to those clearances, which are almost zero apart from no overhead flight, or you can fly to the 30 meters horizontal clearance or 5 meters if you're in the low speed mode. So that's the basics of the A2 CFC. But you can't do that if you've only got the A1, A3 you need the A2
yeah, I have actually got a video which I'm recording because I'm hopping over the channel very soon, and it is going to be a bit of an ironic look at the fact that the drone that I can't fly in the UK, exactly the same drone, 110. Once I get over there, I can fly it obviously much closer to uninvolved people and as a in the A1 airspace essentially. So yes, there's a bit of irony there. Just very quickly before I'm going to step out of I'm going to do your job for you for a minute, Will, and step out of the order of the questions. There's the one in the chat which I just want to answer it just whilst I know the chap is watching, if that makes sense. It's from Tom Brack, and he says he owns a DJI Mini 2 and have an operator ID and flyer ID. Is there anything else that I need to do if I wanted to use my drone to start a little photography, videography business over the summer? And yes, there isn't much. Obviously, fly safely to the regulations, etc. But you do need commercial insurance, which needs to be EC 785/2004 compliant. Now, the good thing is that sounds technical, but all of the commercial, as long as you go and get insurance from one of the specialist providers, so Moonrock or Cover Drone are absolutely fantastic. I've used Cover Drone for many years, even before I was on YouTube talking about drones. And if you get their commercial grade insurance, it is compliant. So you don't even need to look through any technicalities of anything, etc. But just as that was one of the most recent questions and an easy one to answer, I thought I would add that.
I'm sorry, Sean. I'm going to jump in and say it. Read the manual. You have to read the manual.
Yeah, well, but that's
that sounds like one of those moments in QI where it pops up behind.
Yeah, we should perhaps have one of those horns. But yes, but again, the manual thing is obviously part of your actual the whole operator ID, flyer ID thing, the CIA thing, rather than specifically to the commercial side of things. But the only thing you need for the commercial is the commercial insurance. So hopefully that helps, sir. Right, Will, back over to you, sir.
Yeah, well, kind of on a similar sort of line, looking at maybe businesses that are using drones. Peter dropped us an email saying recently watching the coronation drone displays and wondered how they comply with drone laws, as I guess he's relating it more to maybe hobbyist point of view. He's saying, not allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight with a single drone. How does it work, essentially, is what he's asking.
Do you mind if I take this one?
I do mind. Go yes. Be quiet. Sit in the corner.
Okay.
Yes, no. Please do. Go on.
So there's the open category, which hobby flyers tend to fly under. Although if you're flying under the Article 16, that's actually technically a specific category flight. And then there's specific category, which allows you to do sort of as standard, fly at slightly reduced distances, do overflight and various other things. But then beyond that, you can write operating safety cases, which enable you to do things outside the normal regulations almost. So for drone swarms, there's a document called CAP 722E, if you want to go and look that one up. And that essentially tells you what you need to cover in an operating safety case to make those flights safe. And essentially those drones are all controlled with very they're able to fly to incredible accuracy. They have something called RTK, and they can fly in a volume of space which is incredibly tight, and they're programmed to just make those patterns, which sounds easy when I say it, but must be a little bit harder. But essentially, it is done with a computer, a lot of people, and a lot of hard work.
No, exactly, and it's worth clarifying that. So the airspace in the UK is segregated into 3 subcategories: open, specific, and certified. All of our flights. What was the name of the person asking the question?
That one was from, I think it was another Peter, I believe. Yes, Peter.
Thanks for your question, Peter. And yes, so all of our flights with Mini 3s and things, we're going out to capture and scare the people at National Trust flying over their properties, etc. That's all within the open category. Then you've got the specific category, which is, as Graham was saying, you're operating under an operational authorization. Then the certified category above it. So essentially, they actually, you're quite right in thinking, oh, how do they do that? Because they're not operating within the same rules that you are when you're out flying as a recreational pilot, is the way to look at it, really. And I suppose you can kind of equate it a little bit to, you know, on the manned aviation side of things, of someone popping out and flying their Cessna at the weekend, and then a full scale commercial 747 flight type thing. There's different, there's obviously different regulations and different
levels of competence and training, and
but a really good question, and a very apt one, obviously, with all of the fantastic drone light shows that were happening over the coronation weekend. I really enjoyed that.
I see there's quite a topic that comes up saying, you know, is that going to be the alternative to the fireworks and the impacts they're having at the moment?
I think personally, I think it does something differently. It seems to be replacing things here in the UK. A lot of times where we would have perhaps seen fireworks previously, we're now seeing drone light shows. But I'm not sure you'll ever separate the USA with their love of fireworks personally. But yeah, it's certainly a future thing.
They also love advertising and sticking commercials, and it's a hell of a lot easier to do that with drones than it is with
because there's even I've even seen the ones with I think it was Crazy Birds did an app launch, and they had the QR codes in the sky and that type of thing, so people attending that show could actually scan a QR code to download the app, and that's it. Just, you know, the marketing possibilities are unfortunately endless, and it's slightly scary to us old guys as well, but there we go.
Let us know in the chat, what do you think? Do you think these drone displays will ever fully replace a good old firework display? It'll be good to see what some of your opinions are in the chat there. We've got a couple questions, mostly around, can I fly in this sort of location? So from the chat. So Lewis said, are you allowed to fly over stadiums? You give an example of Tottenham Hotspur on a non-match day. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's all down to I would look at it from the point of view of not necessarily, Graham will hate me when I say don't worry about what you're flying over, because I don't mean it in such a loose sense. It's more, you know, check the airspace, check in terms of if you're going to be flying over people and the type of drone that you're flying and that type of thing. So it's more working backwards from that in terms of, you know, is the flight permissible under regulation, and then really if it isn't an FRZ, then actually yes, you are able to fly. You will find that the DJI drones, and I think I did see Lewis having a back and forth with our senior moderator in the chat, Andy, regarding unlocks and things, and you will find that a lot of the Premier League stadiums are actually locked by DJI's geofence, which is also a good opportunity to remind people that just because your DJI drone lets you take off doesn't mean it's legal. You should definitely check the apps and NATs, etc. first.
And the opposite is true. Just because it doesn't mean it's illegal. So I know that people are lovers of the pig's bladder and the pig bladder moving around game. I'm not sure what it's called, but you look at a football stadium and it's a big building and lots of people go there and love it and worship there. But actually, it's a commercial building, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just a commercial building.
That's right. Sometimes
it isn't a crowd in it, so don't fly over it when it's got a crowd in it. But if it hasn't, the only sort of rule I sort of have is, if the drone comes out of the sky and lands somewhere, can I knock on the door and ask for it back? And what reaction will I get?
I mean, which is one of the things we always say on the channel. Always think about the emergency situation. Always think about what could happen in terms of flying. So I would worry less about what the thing is that you're overflying, and more about if the flight itself is within the regs and within clear airspace and that type of thing. But yeah, don't allow any particular site to suddenly become, you know, some kind of hallowed airspace because of X. But yeah, certainly in terms of flying there on non-match days, I've flown plenty of stadiums, including Wembley Stadium. So which always gets a bit of a shock when people see those photos. But there we go.
Perfect. Yeah, Graham actually took one of the questions there from David, saying, if my drone flies over a property and for some reason crashes inside of that property's fence line, are they required by law to give that drone back to the operator?
we're coming on to property matters now. My understanding of property is I don't think they have to give it you back, do they?
I think don't.
They're not allowed to dispose.
Yeah, they're not allowed to dispose. I think technically they do, but it's one of those ones that you can argue both ways, as far as I'm aware.
It's the old apples falling over your neighbour's fence. You can't eat them, but you
bringing that question back to the sort of drone side of things. I think it's interesting from the point of view that often, because people generally will know the drone regulations fairly well and they'll know the basics, and the basics aren't too difficult to stick to. It's actually often other laws, legislation where people will actually come unstuck. So it's always worth having that kind of thing in mind in terms of actually are other aspects of my flights legal in terms of general law, not just specific regulations relating to drones.
You've got to ask yourself, do you want to go and knock on the door of the naturist campsite and ask for your drone back?
Yeah, exactly. Oscar Cymru in the chat is saying UK law indicates that they don't have to return anything that falls within the bounds of their property. And you see, I've had sort of conflicting information to that as well. So it's
we need black belt barristers.
Yes, that's right. Yes, well, yeah. In actual fact, he is coming on the channel very, very soon, actually. So we will actually hold that question to ask Daniel when he comes on. Excellent question. And brilliant. Again, it just shows that there is such a wide subject matter out there that often flying our drones will start impacting on other parts of law, which is always fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Fantastic. We had a few answers to the fireworks question. Some people were suggesting adding sparklers to the drones. I think that was quite a nice touch. But on the topic of maybe adding and modifying the drones, we've got a question here from one of your YouTube videos. And this is from Oliver Dots. And they asked, they've just registered a sub 250 gram drone, DJI Mini 2 SE. With the CAA, but they've added a strobe light to it, which weighs 6 grams. What do I have to do now? Question mark.
Well, the first thing to do is weigh it, because do you say it's a Mini 2 SE or just yeah?
Yes.
Okay. Let me have a look at the specs, because also you'll find that different production runs can actually
the spec will just say 249.
Well, no, in actual fact it says 246. For the Mini 2 SE, they do actually put quite specific weights on their spec pages, but you will often find if there's a different chipset suddenly, because some of the Mini 2s were 237 and some were 24 something, the late 240s. But yes, essentially, if it goes over 250 grams, you lose all of the sub 250 gram benefits. So you can no longer fly over people. But however, if you take an A2 CofC, you have flexibility up to 500 grams to still be able to fly in the A1 category. So that's everything you can do in the sub 250 apart from flying over people, basically.
I often give that answer in the groups, and it amazes me how many people seem to shy away from doing what is really useful training, a really useful course that will really give you a decent background in safety and give you a great sort of grounding knowledge to move onwards with bigger drones. And it's worth doing if you're flying a Mini. It's worth doing just to give yourself that little bit of flexibility. I figure for the price of a battery,
exactly. But it is always that thing of more training, more expense, that type of thing. And certainly there are some people that have saved for a long time just to get the drone and things. So actually, the extra. But if you look out for the sales as well, I know that UAV Hub and others like Osprey, etc., will have the odd sale on and that type of thing when you can really pick them up. But that extra flexibility for up to 500 grams is useful. Things like the DJI Avata, you can then fly in the A1 category with a spotter, of course. So yes, but another great question, and hopefully that helped.
I had a complete giggle there from XJet with LEDs are very heavy, but that's cancelled out because they're lights.
Bruce.
I had to mute my microphone as that one came in.
Excellent.
So okay, we got another email come in. Now it was quite long-winded, so I'll try and sort of like condense it down. But essentially, Cruise is very confused around the sort of rules and regulations of the no-fly zone around particularly airports, compared to what DJI says, and actually having to kind of communicate with ATC. Yeah, so I think that's kind of like the main gist of the question. Where,
okay, yeah. So looking at it, he's
flights,
saying the around an airport, the no-fly zone, and the next circle is an authorization zone, which on DJI says they can temporarily remove the restriction. Went on to DJI Fly Safe website and he applied, got permission for 3 days, but then someone told him that that does not constitute as permission from the airports, and then I still need to contact ATC, and the permission from DJI means nothing. Yeah, absolutely. The permission from and I'll let Graham explain the full, because I can see him going on this one. Very much in his wheelhouse, but the DJI software bit is purely covering DJI's backside. In terms of you taking responsibility for the flight in that zone, essentially. So it is nothing to do with actually gaining any kind of formal permission, etc. But yeah, obviously you do have to get permission, don't you, Graham, from the FRZ owner, essentially?
Absolutely, yeah. So during working hours, that would be the air traffic control unit. Outside hours, even if there's no flights going in and out, they can be used for emergency flights and emergency landings. So you have to go to the airport operator, whoever that may be, and sometimes that can be tricky. The larger airports, most of the larger airports tend to come under what's called the National Air Traffic Service, NATS, and you can look up NATS non-standard flight, and that will take you to a little form that will let you essentially fill in all of your details and put forward a request to those larger airports. So that covers the Heathrows, Gatwicks of this world, and Manchester, I think, and lots of others. But yeah, if you think in terms of your drone is from China, and that permission you're getting for your drone is the permission given by a Chinese company, it has nothing to do with UK legislation. You have to get clearance from the owner of that piece of airspace.
But one thing I would say is don't be intimidated by it. You are going to have issues.
No.
Like, for instance, East Midlands Airport, I will call them out for the fact that they want to charge you lots of money just to even consider the application. But on the whole, the ATCs, even the large airports, they also believe in keeping airspace open and free to access for all. And there are just as many people on the manned aviation side who are very passionate about that, and will actually it's something that they will provide the access to fairly simply. I mean, for instance, things like Gatwick, there's an email address that you send with all your details, etc. And so it's essentially the process for someone like Gatwick is that you will email your details across. They'll come back and say yes or no to that. They'll ask you all sorts of things, such as serial numbers and height of flight, precise takeoff locations, that type of thing. But even then, when you've got that permission on the day of the flight, so before you do the flight, they will give you a number where you need to call air traffic control and actually get essentially a final permission in terms of what's actually happening on the day. So there are steps, but they will be explained, but they're not intimidating, and it's quite exciting to do sometimes. And in fact, Artless LB in the chat is saying he did his first NSF, non-standard flight, in an FRZ this week. It was all quite straightforward, and the ATC are friendly, and that's very much the experience that I have of most ATCs. That they it is their full-time job. They're passionate about airspace as well, and all they want is things to be safe, essentially.
Absolutely, and not just the ATCs. Just before Christmas, I did a job. Just after Christmas, New Year, did a job in Windsor, middle of Windsor. So it comes under the Windsor Castle restricted area. And providing you've got a justification for doing the job, the guys there are friendly as anything, really nice. They don't like you flying over the castle, though. That isn't what I'd recommend trying.
Indeed.
Not if you value your drone and your
just another one in the chat that's really quick to answer. Tone B, hi. Can I use my EASA drone operator flyer ID to fly my drone in the UK, or just the CAA version only? Absolutely, completely separate systems. So your EASA operator ID and flyer ID are for the EASA member states only, and the UK is literally for the UK only. So very, very separate there. Hope that helps, Tone.
Can I just, I don't normally point stuff out from the feed because I'm not very good at this yet, but can I just point out there's a chap there called Chris Lawrence. If you see his name appear in a thread on Facebook, he'll probably know what he's talking about because he is ATC up at Edinburgh. So yeah, sorry, Chris, if that means you're a marked man, but
no.
you look a lot like Dougal on your
Yes,
profile. They'll never find you in that disguise. But no, Chris knows his onions.
Yeah, no, indeed, and thank you, Chris. And that's actually one of the things I really enjoy that about this channel, from the point of view that the people that we have following the channel and who are in the comments, etc., you'll often find have so much experience. And yeah, thanks for joining us, Chris. And he's saying there that we're very friendly. Most units are open to aviation related visitors too. Just mind the biscuits. Yes, no stealing the biscuits, 100%. Excellent. Okay, Will, should we move on to the next one?
Yes. Okay. So we had one in the chat almost near the start of the stream from Paul Taylor, and he was asking, Western Supermare have beach rangers who say drone flying is not allowed. Surely they can't stop an overflight of the beach with a drone, i.e., take off and land from elsewhere.
Unless there is there is things like SSSIs and there is very rare, relatively rare. Legislation that can stop over flights. So really what you want them to do is back it up in writing. Ask them to tell you, where is the legislation that prevents me from doing that, essentially. But yes, typically if it's a beach, that type of thing, then actually overflight is permissible as long as it's safe, etc. And again, as Graham said earlier, and as I say in all of my videos, with anything to do with flying over land that people don't want you to fly over, keep that in mind. Make sure that you have got your bases covered in terms of getting that drone back should anything go wrong. Typically, if I'm doing a flight somewhere where I don't actually, whether people don't want you flying over, I will actually keep very much to the outskirts of the location and capture the footage that I need. I won't fly 500 meters into their land, etc., just in case. But that's just my personal thoughts on it.
And if we're talking about beaches, of course, it's worth again doing a search for the Crown Estate foreshore map. I think if you put that into Google, it should bring up the Crown Estate foreshore map. And that has little purple marks around the country where the beaches or the foreshore, so between high and low tide, is owned by the Crown, and the Crown are given permission for non-commercial, so for recreational use of drones. So you can go down there and fly, taking into account the SSSI sort of requirements if there's a particular bird species that are going to get spooked, or seals are another one to look out for. So but that can open up a whole area, and if somebody on the beach says no, that's not yours, say, well, sorry, but the king said I could do this.
Yes, exactly. So. Yes, as Cool Cat saying in the chat, get off my land. Yes, couldn't have put it better myself. Excellent question though. What's up next?
Brilliant. Yeah, so we have quite a few about just generally traveling in and out the UK with a drone. I'll take this one here, for example, from Traveller473 from one of your YouTube videos. He says, I'm traveling to the UK soon with a DJI Phantom 3. It's in a purpose-built hard case, and I intend to check it in on the flight. It only has one battery, which will be fully charged. Any advice about going would be greatly appreciated. So maybe just some advice traveling into the UK.
Was that a comment on the
drones on a plane video?
The snakes on a plane take that I did on, I tried to do a clever snakes on a plane thing on the title and it failed miserably, but there we go. Thank you for laughing at it, Will.
That's what I'm here for.
Sure. Yes, but it's essentially it's become a lot easier to fly with a drone on commercial airlines these days. The only thing I would recommend, the number one thing I would recommend, is speak to your airline. Check their website for their policies on it, and if not, give their customer services a call, and they will explain exactly what they want you to do. It changes with the size of battery and that type of thing, and how many batteries, and etc.
You're generally okay with 100 milliwatt hours of whatever.
Exactly. But if you check with your airline, you will generally find, have a very itchy top lip this evening for some reason, you will generally find that they are very happy to confirm. It used to be a big deal. It used to be sort of taking a drone in, electronic parts and lithium batteries and that type of thing, especially FPV stuff would get you some very funny looks. But actually it's becoming quite a normal thing, especially, the DJI Minis and things.
It did the sorry, I missed the name,
Okay.
but name Will?
Traveller. Yeah, it was Traveller 473.
Okay, Traveller. I think you mentioned checking the drone in. Now, if it's checked in luggage, take the battery out, make sure the battery's discharged, stick some tape over the terminal, stick in a LiPo bag, take it in hand baggage. They do not want drone batteries going on fire in the cargo hold where they can't see them and deal with them. So that's the reason they want them in with you on the aircraft. It sounds horrific having a fire where all the people are, but actually they can see that. They can use an extinguisher. They can deal with it. It won't be nice. Nobody will like it, and they'll hate you. But they can sort it out. If it's in the hold, it's all going up.
But yeah, but contact your airline, because every airline these days has a very precise policy about it. Some have slightly differing things, but as long as you stick to that and you turn up in that way, you'll find that security will be very, very friendly, basically. So and it really is no big deal. The last time I flew with an Inspire, and it wasn't even really mentioned. It wasn't a big deal, although I didn't take batteries with me. I used batteries that were down route, actually, but which was a lot more simple for all sorts of reasons. But another excellent question.
Fantastic. Quick one there from Mark, who's just dropped one in the chat. He just said, I bought my first drone, Mini 3. In my area, there's a CTR on drone assist. Does this mean I can't fly there?
No, it does not mean that. The controlled... I always want to call them control regions, and I get told off. But the CTRs...
Chris Lawrence...
CTRs are actually for manned aviation, and is it under 20 kilograms or under 25 kilograms? You don't need any kind of extra permissions, basically. So certainly for your Mini 2 you're okay. Just keep an eye out, because it's the control region for manned aircraft, so it's a wider zone around the aerodrome FRZ, where that aircraft is within that height limit is within the direct control of ATC of the tower. And basically you'll be able to fly there, no problem at all. But just, I always keep in mind that I'm in that kind of area. And as Andy Cortez is saying, you can actually toggle the CTR off in the Drone Assist app, which is a very handy thing to do, because then you see which are. I think it's in the advanced. Into the settings, then it's an advanced settings. Yeah, exactly. And I can see Chris Lawrence is saying, I don't tell you off, I just educate you.
Don't tell you off, I just educate you.
Thank you, Chris. Chris,
he's very
Chris, you'll have to
I'm not sad, I'm just disappointed.
In fact, I'm going to make Chris a moderator. I hope you don't mind, Chris. We keep promoting you in the chat. And just so you're recognized, but you're now going to become our resident ATC expert. So there you go. And whether you like it or not, frankly,
that'll learn you, boy.
So CTRs, no issue in terms of your recreational flight, particularly with something like a Mini 2, etc.
Excellent, nice. There was some very good clarification there from you guys, so appreciate that. We had an email from Jonathan come in, and he said, just discovered your YouTube channel and wanted to say how good it is. It's always nice to get a bit of positive feedback. And he has a quick question about, so he's bought a Mini 3 Pro about 6 months ago, absolutely loves it, and he lives next door to Thorpe Park, about 300 meters away, he's noted there. And he's noticed this year that they've put up posters all around it saying that Thorpe Park is a no-fly zone area. He's been tempted to fly over either in the morning or the evening, as there's many lakes and the sunsets can be quite spectacular. So his question is, the no-fly zones in the public space is kind of saying, how does that work with the posters, and is there an up-to-date map you can refer to?
If you look at a poster and it says no drone zone, this is in the UK, and there isn't anything in the corner giving you the legislation, that is relying on, it is probably just a sign from somebody. Again, they are essentially telling you that you shouldn't, they don't want you taking off or landing in their location. Personally, I know you're talking about doing it very early, etc. I would be very, very wary of flying somewhere like Thorpe Park. Everybody has their own risk factors and their own, level that they're willing to risk it for a biscuit, as it were. There isn't an FRZ. It's in the CTR for, would that be Heathrow? Would that be Heathrow CTR? I'm just looking on it at the
Yes,
moment.
it would be. Certainly Heathrow. Thinking where it is.
EGLL London CTR. So it's in a CTR, so you're absolutely fine airspace restriction wise, but obviously just bear in mind that there's lots of lakes surrounding Thorpe Park and that type of thing, and I would say you're going to struggle in terms of visual line of sight, being on public land and then flying over, because I do know Thorpe Park quite well, or even though actually I hate theme parks, but anyway, and
it comes back to that staging question, doesn't it? So if you fly over, something goes wrong, a pigeon hits it, it goes down, you're not getting it back. You're just not. They've told you they don't want you flying over their place. They're not going to say, yeah, here's your drone back. What they're likely to do is say, oh, this drone crash is on operator ID on. Contact the CAA.
Yes.
Article
241 was this flight legal? Was this flight safe, etc. And yeah. So, but again, and let me actually bring it up on. Let me press a couple of buttons here, and I should actually be able to bring it up. Always good TV when you've got to go. Oh, and then Graham's in front of it. Thank you, Graham.
That's me.
Let's put you behind. So as you can see here, this is the drone safety map, the drone assist map for it. The red is the CTR that you're seeing on the screen. It is a very complex area to fly. You've got lots of different lakes and things, and you've obviously also got the M25 and the M3 that goes next to it as well. So I would say your takeoff and landing position, unless you've got somewhere, again, you may live very, very close or something, that you're confident on in terms of maintaining VLOS, etc. Because if something went wrong, as Graham said, you can absolutely guarantee your flight will get scrutinized. 100% guarantee your flight will get scrutinized. And it's as with most things, with a lot of the minutiae of the drone regulations, it's when things go wrong that they really kick you in the backside, basically.
I mean, if you're lucky, it'll land in the lake and nobody will know, but you'll again, you'll never see a drone again. I'm sort of figuring if you want the sun reflecting off the lake, you want to be at an angle from outside the park anyway. I can see those lakes, I can see where west is. Yeah. And I'd be the other side of the park, the other side of that road.
Indeed. Yeah. But again, always keep in mind that even when the park is closed, there's still going to be a lot of people in there from the point of view of the staff and that type of thing. So just be very, very careful with what you're flying and whether or not you can fly over people and all of those kind of cool things. But another good question, a very unique question as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, Andy's making a good point. The experience of actually being in Thorpe Park is where you only get to go on about 2 or 3 rides, so the whole day is it's not particularly the best most of the time.
It's actually more, my experience of Thorpe Park is actually more geographical. A few of the things that happen. So yes, apologies if we just had a dropped frame on OBS. So if there was a slight glitch in the live feed there, apologies, but we should be back to normal now. Excellent. Up next, Will.
Yeah, we got a couple more good ones. Chris Good from one of your YouTube videos said, should police be investing into DJI products while there are current security, legitimate or not, concerns with DJI products?
Interesting one. This I think was probably on the police drones action video. I think I remember seeing this one on there actually, which obviously showed the DJI M30T being used by Lincolnshire police drones. We've got some content coming up on this on the channel in terms of DJI bans and DJI not being used in the US by certain states and entity lists and all this kind of thing. And it is a real rabbit hole to go down. But really, unless they know something they're not telling us, which is, I'm sure more than possible, It is deeper and wider political issues are at play here, and certainly I know for an absolute fact I would prefer to have reliable DJI aircraft flying with search and rescue and with first responders like police forces, etc., than pretty much any other manufacturer. You see the uproar in places like Florida where they're no longer able to fly Chinese drones for things like search and rescue, etc. That is actually putting people's lives at risk, in my opinion, in my personal opinion. And I've and hopefully you realize that I deep dive things in a way that probably few other people in the drone world do, and I still haven't found anything concrete. I can give you lots of political reasons, I can give you espionage reasons, I can give you all sorts of reasons from DJI as a company, as a whole, as a Chinese entity, but that's the same with any Chinese company. Those concerns are the same. There's nothing, in my opinion, that I have seen that is specific that means that you shouldn't use DJI drones, especially as you can ring fence the servers. You actually don't have to have any information going across to the Chinese servers, that type of thing. Obviously, there's always the issue with what's really going on in the apps, but anyway, it's a whole other question. But in my opinion, it's a lot of smoke at the moment without too much evidence.
And the history of tariff and non-tariff barriers on industries doesn't generally end well for the people imposing those barriers. So it will be a good way to probably increase profit.
Yeah, no, exactly. As Johnny DRC is saying, Florida police drones for sale cheap. Yes, you have to wonder if there's anything in there, don't you? But, excellent. What's up next?
Yeah, so I think Mark was also asking about just sort of like the initial process of getting maybe your first drone. James also has emailed in asking about just purchasing a sub 250 gram drone. He is let's just say so he says he's a bit lost to know where to start, as not from a lack of confidence point of view, just the inspiration in general. The CAA rules aren't the most daunting part to him. He's an airline pilot, so airspace, ANO, pre-flight, all that's very familiar. He just needs some ideas about how to start and where to go from once it arrives. He gives the example: do I just fly it around in the living room, or where can I head outside?
Yeah, no, indeed. I would recommend our UK drone rules in 8 minutes video is a good place to start, and that is one of the first videos within our UK drone rules playlist, which I would obviously I would love you to sit and watch the whole thing. There's about 30 videos in there, but I've scheduled them so that they go deeper dive as they go on. So if you get about 8 or 9 videos in and you take all of that in and that type of thing, then actually you'll be registered, you'll be ready, you'll know the basics, and you'll be safe and hopefully confident to get out there and conduct your first flights.
But is that the problem here, or is it looking for creative inspiration what to do with the drone once he's got it outside the living room? I don't know.
Was that which way did you take the question, Will? Was it regs or creativity?
For me, it feels a bit more just having the confidence to fly it in terms of regs. I think this is the way it's coming across. Yeah.
But also in terms of creativity, join a few of the Facebook groups. Even though I despise most of the groups myself, for all sorts of reasons, controversial. But Graham is very, very brave because he's in all of them and actually is active and answers people, which I think is a sign of madness, personally.
Yeah, I'm getting to think the same.
If you join a few of the groups, you'll find people will post their pictures and videos, etc., which will give you some good inspiration of places to visit. And that type of thing, which is awesome. I can also see
start a business, and then your clients will tell you what to fly.
Yes,
and that's inspirational.
Yes, exactly. It's always interesting actually, because obviously, although I fly commercially, I'm a recreational pilot at heart, so I know exactly the creative sort of pang that people get. Whereas for Graham, it's very much a tool that comes out to earn bucks, as it were. So, and Chris Lawrence, he's just talking generally about the DJI app thing, saying, or is it more an education thing of pointing folks to the correct apps? You can't blame end users for assuming DJI apps should be accurate, and he's 100% correct with that. And another reason why Chris is obviously an awesome guy, and one of those voices in ATC and manned aviation that is very, very welcome, because the whole thing, and that's what you'll find generally with people, ATC and that type of thing within manned aviation. They want to educate everybody. They want to include everybody in the awesome thing that is aviation, even down at our level of flying drones, etc. So.
Would it be too controversial to say, I don't know, if only we had a regulator who was actively pushing this sort of information out? Or
we've just lost Graham.
Too controversial.
Graham, are you there? No, yep, no. the CAA hack, which is present in all of our live streams, because of course we are a secret government organisation. Geeksvana has now kicked Graham from the channel, and you won't see him again. But no, I don't think that's too controversial at all, frankly. Right, next one. If you have another one.
Yeah. Well, this one, actually, Land Rover Lover 166 from one of your YouTube videos says Jeremy Clarkson used his drone to chase sheep. Is that allowed?
Yeah, I've watched the episode he's talking about, and I think that there would have been, in all probability, there is always the whole thing of how do I put this? The sort of artistic license. So whatever you see on Top Gear and those kind of shows and Clarkson's Farm, etc., isn't necessarily 100% what actually happened, I would say. So that's a start, a given. You should be very, very careful how you fly drones around livestock. Yeah, it was a comedy moment, in my opinion, that wasn't too serious. I didn't think there was too much wrong with what he did. I would just be very, very careful. It's interesting seeing a farmer flying a drone around sheep, when actually, if a recreational pilot did that, most farmers would probably get quite annoyed. But that's just my opinion. Just before Graham says anything on that, just very quickly, thank you very much, Mike Drennan, for the 5 gifted memberships. Really appreciate that. Incredibly generous. Thank you. I have known Mike for a very long time now, and he's one of he's more a friend than a viewer these days, frankly. And thank you, Mike. I really do appreciate it. And John Burns, Amit Lathia, Liam Carroll, Keith Wilson, and Billy MTB were gifted those memberships. So thank you. And again, thank you, Andy Cortez, for another gifted membership as well. I really appreciate it. And it was actually gifted to DJ Audits. Good to see you, sir. Hope you're well. Yes, very cool. Free memberships, I win again, says XJet. Yes, it's actually YouTube that picks them randomly, actually. But yes, interesting. And Andy Cortez with some laughing faces saying, "Can I retract my membership gift?" Bless him. Excellent. But yes, Graham, do you have any thoughts on that?
Just on the entertainment thing, you know, we don't know what's done in the edit. I don't know if there was a sheepdog there or a vet or you know, or an intimacy coordinator, probably one of those.
Very
job
on topic.
Said I was never given the option of when I was at school.
Yes, very on topic. Very good. Yeah, and John Coopy's trying to start trouble in the chat. Who would want free memberships to fake news? Just so you're aware why someone with a moderator wrench is attacking the channel and I'm not kicking him out. Me and John have this little game where he's an idiot and doesn't like admitting it, so he decides to attack me whenever he can. But yes, I will ban him later, I'm sure.
Was going to question that. I've seen that a few times before.
Yeah, it's actually it's a funny backstory. Actually, we started attacking each other in the live chat of a show that he was a co-host on, but it was a joke because actually I speak to John Coopy probably actually as much, if not more, than I speak to Graham, and I speak to Graham an awful lot, don't I, Graham? So that's saying something. If I say I message Coopy more than I do you, that tells you how much I message that I'm in contact with him. But actually, people started to believe that we hated each other. and it actually became a thing within the US drone community in particular, that people thought that whenever we turned up on streams together and that type of thing, we didn't like each other. But of course, John is the FPV editor of Geeksvana, and he gives an awful lot of input into my stories and an awful lot of help and assistance behind the scenes on the channel, which I greatly appreciate it. And everybody should head across and support his channel as well, and his TikTok. So yes, top FPV idiot here, as he says. You said it. Although I did call you idiot first, but there we go.
Lindsay asked, on crowds, is overflying a popular car park legal? And what about the car park, an event where every car is certain to be empty?
Okay. Depends what you're flying. And obviously, you know, all the other good stuff of airspace and all the other types of things as well. It to me personally, if you're overflying a car park for a few seconds, so you're transitioning from one empty field over to another empty field or something of that type, and indeed if you're flying in a congested area, you're not going to be able to avoid parked vehicles all the time anyway. But to me, any kind of mass congregation of cars, and that especially open field sort of, I personally wouldn't, just from a what if something goes wrong point of view. Yeah, the normal rules will apply in terms of overflight of people for sub 250, and if you've or if you've got the correct authorizations in place and that type of thing. But it's something that, again, that I would say, unless it's momentary and unless you're at a decent height, so that if something goes wrong, the drone can hopefully land somewhere else rather than in the car park, you're obviously looking at, you know, a damage issue and that type of thing, essentially. Any thoughts, Graham?
I'm sort of, if we're talking sub 250, then the legislation has said that is low risk.
Yeah, that's
CA
right.
says it's low risk. So is there you talk about crowds? I've never seen a crowded car park. I've seen a car park crowded with cars.
But again, the word crowd is almost outdated as well, isn't it? Because what if we're talking, because he's talking about events as well. What about, you know, Goodwood, where people will often picnic out the back of their car and that type of thing. So actually, very quickly you could end up with a situation where you shouldn't overfly because those people can't move out of the way quickly and that type of thing.
The cars and the reason for people being there is completely irrelevant. What is relevant is an assembly of people, which is a number of people in an area which is so small that they can't move out of the way easily should the drone fail. I sort of stick in an additional rule there, which is, do the people know that the drone's flying? So if people know the drone's flying, then I'd say they can be a little bit closer together than if they don't. If they don't know it's flying, then they're not going to know it's crashing. If they don't know it's crashing, they can't move out of the way anyway. So
yes, although you know, that isn't what the regulations say, is the only thing I would say from that point of view. So and that's where the advice has to come from. But I completely agree with you, 100%. That even an individual person, if they don't know it's coming, then they
get it.
But as I've said many times before, don't follow me and Graham down every rabbit hole, because obviously we go down the rabbit hole so you don't have to. But essentially, you know, if the people can't get out of the way, so if you're flying over a car park and it is an event like Goodwood or that type of thing where you are like to have people picnicking in the car park, then it might not be a good idea, because also you won't be able to see those groups of people until you're over them, essentially. But it's all about risk factor, and we're talking about a risk within a very low risk flight.
Yeah.
So
it's very small risk. To me, a beach, people who have got plenty of room to move out of the way from each other, but are laying down sunbathing, are not able to move out of the way because they're not stood up. Yes. So that you've got to be far more careful flying over a beach with people sunbathing and taking part in activities. You've got to say, well, you know, don't do that, because nobody's going to know you're coming. So fly to one side of them, fly over the edge of the sea, where or over the cliffs at the back, whatever it is. Just if it feels wrong, it probably is.
Yes, exactly, 100%, exactly. Now, I'm going to take over again very quickly. I apologise, Will, and answer someone's question in the chat. If I can get the chat to work very quickly. Actually, I've actually got a very slight problem. Carry on, Will, with your question. I'll come back to this one.
Yeah, was it the one to do with the red circles around the airport, or there was another one that just come in from Nathan that said the M3C? Where do you fly it, and how do you hold training done to fly it?
Yeah, bear with me just 1 second, because I've actually got a problem with one of my apps.
No problem.
Move on to the next question. We'll come back to that.
Sure. I guess this one's for people coming into. Actually, wait, we could go into this one's. Lee asked, "Hi Sean, can the CAA copy the EASA rules on C1 class drones? And if you have an A2 CofC, can we at least get a better restrictions? They shafted us 2 weeks after the classic was out. Least they could do."
Yes, I agree that actually I think we could have kept the C class ratings fairly simply. I think I know the reasons why, because of course to have kept it would have meant that we would have had to have recognized the EASA's bodies, which of course we can't do because we're a separate sovereign state now, thanks to Brexit. So in actual fact, there are very important legal reasons why they couldn't continue to accept them, and that was never the intention long term. But yes, it is unfortunately something that we can't actually get round. Thoughts on that, Graham? While I try and fix something in the background.
Yeah, it is this sort of tremendously sad thing that we had this sort of in front of us, the lovely green rolling hills and dreamland of flying C1 drones in a town centre. Wouldn't it be absolutely lovely? But yeah, as Sean said, it wasn't to be. I think the biggest issue being the lack of warning. I think that was the horrific thing. It was clear that there were C1 drones going to which one it would be back in the May, and yet it waited until I think the November, wasn't it? November 22 before the announcement was made. So
yeah. I mean, which was, to have those, to have a C1 drone released before we knew. So then we had that situation of people, having to make videos of, oh, can you fly this drone or can't you fly this drone, and that type of thing. It was in my opinion not good. It was because it has created confusion which still exists today. And to me, that is not safe, and that is not something which is a good thing, frankly.
But can I just point out, I see the CAA taking an awful lot of criticism for that, but actually that decision came from the Department for Transport. That was
and they were waiting for that. They were waiting for that for a very long time.
It's a legislative decision. It wasn't the CAA. It was something that is like all of the laws that are passed down, essentially imposed on the CAA.
Yes, indeed, and I'm sure you'll find as many people in the CAA that thought that there might have been ways to keep it. But again, as I say, there are actual legal reasons why it couldn't have happened, sadly. But there we go. Yeah, the Mojek's asking, is it true you keep Will behind the camera because he's more hair than you and you're jealous? Only kidding, of course. You have to get.
Is
him on
that
camera
why,
sometime.
Sean? I was like, yeah, my camera's working.
Will is a very good-looking young man, and I'm sure that might actually be. But no, in actual fact, he has a lot to do, and it's one of those things of one less bit of pressure for him in terms of being able to produce the show. But we thought it was a fun way of starting to get him involved because, as I say, he is our new production manager for the channel, and I want him to have exposure to the audience, as it were, as well.
I'm sorry, I've been going by the misapprehension that Will is actually a lime-coloured Smartie, sponsored by Western Digital. That's
from my initials.
I'm
actually completely AI generated. The Sean's invested heavily into.
Wouldn't that be awesome? Yes, I fully support that 110%. Now you cannot tell that I had a complete failure of the of lots of systems, then, can you? Which is wonderful. It shows the systems work essentially. Now somebody asked, and I'm going to try and get this up now and working, but somebody has asked about the the zones around airports and then the wider zones, didn't they? They asked a question about that.
Yes, I believe that was JP asked that. Yeah
Okay, so I'm going to bring one up, and
look at that.
Graham's going to explain it. So Graham, this
really?
bit in the middle here, this circle with the lines coming out, what is that?
Right. Okay. That's an FRZ, Sean. Funnily enough, I was about to dive into the air
what does
navigation.
it stand for?
And flight restriction zone, Sean.
Thank you.
That stands for. So essentially, you can't fly in that area without the permission of the owner of that flight restriction zone, which, as we said earlier, would tend to be air traffic control. You might find that it's just circular because there's one down at I was about to use the old Battersea down in Battersea, which is a heliport. And so, being a heliport, they don't need the little tags at either end because that's essentially
because
the runway protection zones.
Exactly, this little area is made up of the FRZ itself, so the aerodrome protection zone, and then the runway protection zones coming out the each side. This is basically where aircraft within the zone of their airport are at their most vulnerable. They're coming in, taking off and landing, doing go-arounds, emergency landings, all the fun things that happen, and it is absolutely, do not fly there without absolute permission. It is, you will get blue flashing lights approaching you very, very quickly if that happens, and you'll be one of those people that we report on Geeksvana on one of our live streams of your court case, frankly. So don't do it. Basically, don't do it.
More and more airports have got very effective detection, and somebody had armed police turn up to his little job, didn't he?
That's right.
A couple of months ago. So
right. Yeah, it does happen.
Scary stuff.
And the outer zone is the CTR zone. So the control area, which is basically, as we were saying before, if you rewind the stream back, we do go into detail about those, but it's essentially for manned aviation that are under the control of that ATC area, basically. So that's those explained in a nutshell. But there is a video on Geeksvana. If you go to the channel and search for the Altitude Angel drone assist explained, I go into full detail in there. So go and check that out. It's a good video. It's a very simple. It's about 4 minutes long, actually. It's a really good.
We won't go into space sites, but they're effectively the same thing.
Yes.
Brilliant. Nice little demo there as well. Fantastic. How are we doing for time, Sean? We all good? Still take a couple more?
We are good for time. We'll give another 10 minutes of questions as we have a lot coming in thick and fast.
Yes.
Graham, will you have electricity for the next 10 minutes?
I say I've got until the electricity board man comes along and turns off our supply, which may happen. So if you hear a dog bark in the background, a man's turned up at the door to turn off our supply. So yes.
So if Graham disappears, I promise it wasn't due to his CAA comments.
Just see him dragged out the we got one in from Colin. So, Sean, do you believe that remote ID will come into force in the UK sooner rather than later?
I think remote ID is definitely coming to the UK. I think it is potentially more advanced than a lot of people realise, and I would say probably 2026 onwards. So once this open category investigation thing is out of the way, I think that will probably be the point where that comes in. But yes, it's a coming sooner than later. Not sure exactly the format it will take. There's all sorts of options. Will it include all recreational flights? Who knows? We don't have a template that we have to follow. We are an individual nation with an individual airspace regulator and government, so we can make our own choices. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what they decide to go down.
And we'll find out whether that's an advantage again or a disadvantage of being outside EASA when it all kicks off.
Yes, exactly. We will 100% be looking over the fence at their RID, and then they'll be looking at ours, and we'll all be looking at the US as that all comes in come September as well. So yes.
My shower studio. It's not. It's the industrial freezer. That is.
People picking on the shower studio. It's the same. It's whatever co-host I get. Matt Williams has a stunning studio, and he still gets it if his color grading's slightly different on his show and stuff. But there we go. That's Tazzy. He's just trying to get a timeout. He actually tries to get timed out in the chat each week. But there we go. Anything else, Will?
Yes, I mean, we have flown through a vast majority of them. We've got a few more from the chat. Big Man Mountain Biker asked, I'm planning to fly in one of East London boroughs to take a nice morning photos of the temple. I'm using a Mavic 3 and on a holder than A2 CofC. What are the risks of my flight not being legal?
Right, say that again.
Yeah, so he is planning to fly in one of the East London boroughs and to take some photos of the temple using a Mavic 3 and as a holder of an A2 CFC. What is the risk of my flight being not legal?
Your issue there is the 50-meter thing.
Yeah.
So you have to be 50 meters horizontal from uninvolved people, and that is the main issue you're going to have. If you can solve that problem by it being very early in the morning and you're in a park next to it or something like that, and you can keep that 50-meter horizontal distance in check, then yeah, you're perfectly okay. Because bear in mind, your A2 CFC is a certificate. It's an advanced permission to fly in congested areas under certain circumstances. So you're kind of you're kind of held to a higher standard, as it were. And that 50-meter horizontal separation is actually very, very important.
So you can bring people under your control. So if you have a few spotters, a few friends who can come along and help out, and as Sean says, it's a quiet time, then you can bring people under your control if and when they enter the area. But given that 50-meter diameter or 50-meter radius, that's tough. Yeah. Tough in some areas. It depends completely on the area.
Exactly. Just very quickly, Little Blue Dinosaur, hi, good to see you, hope you're well. Do you know if there's been any progress with Sora or at least additional PDRAs holding off doing an OSC? Now, Little Blue Dinosaur, I know that you are one of the new members of the very specific network. We do actually have some Sora and OSC content coming up with this man below as well, very, very soon. So I will defer that question to an upcoming specialist stream for the very specific network.
That is very specific stuff, isn't it?
Very specific, yes. Hence the very specific network. But that will be coming very soon, and we'll be able to do a really good deep dive. We're actually organising our first meetup, so that we can all sort of meet up in a Zoom call as well and have a chat about things and get to know what the questions out there are, etc. So we can approach other stakeholders with questions and that type of thing. But there's lots of news coming up on that very soon. And anybody that is watching that's part of the new tier levels, the very specific network and the open for business tier level as well, thank you for joining. It's a very exciting side of the channel that I'm really looking forward to. For anybody that's flying in the open category that happens to wander across that section, I apologize, because to say it's a deeper dive is an absolute understatement. Some people say that I get too nitty gritty and too rabbit holey with things. You don't want to go down there.
You've not even started, have we?
Yeah. Excellent. Any others? One last
one,
well, perhaps?
Speaking of meetups, Andy asked, I think it was right at the start, will there be a Geeksvana summer meetup this year?
I hope so. This is one of the things that I really want to make happen. I've gone quite far down the road of organising a few of them. The one was going to be coming along to the studios for a Christmas meetup with a few of the regulars. And yes, summer drone meetups. It's something I definitely want to do, but it's very, very difficult to organise for all sorts of reasons, especially if we bear in mind, we have people, across the country, basically. It's difficult to know where to put them, and then do we do multiple ones? And yeah, I would love to do that, Andy, and watch this space. There might be some informal setups happening, but it would be awesome. Yeah, as Cool Cat's saying, a Geeksvana barbecue and get together, let's do it. I would love to do it, but it might actually become one of Will's jobs to organise. So
barbecue, I'm in. I'll get that set up tomorrow.
I like the idea of Geeksfield.
Yeah, Geeksfield, GeeksCon 2023, Maestro is saying, and Geekstonbury from the Mojack. I think that's awesome.
They're doing my job for me. I won't need to do any of the advertising.
I like Geekstonbury actually, because that's probably standing in a muddy field with a drone. That kind of Nerdvana 2023.
It will rain.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Okay, well, I think that will be a good time to call things to a halt. We've got lots of questions. If you've asked questions in the chat and we haven't actually answered them, I will add them to the next Q&A. This has been a really fun experience, and I think we will repeat these fairly regularly especially as it helps, other people that are on the replay, on the rewatch, get all these questions answered as well. But it's been fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. A really good sized crowd. Could you all do me one really quick favor? Could you all hit the like button for me? There's over 100 people still watching. And if you could all hit the like button on the way out, I would really, really appreciate it. But Graham, thank you for joining us.
No problem at all. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I was looking forward to this, and it hasn't disappointed. It's been
awesome,
great.
Isn't it? Because we often chat about these things that come up as well. We're like, oh, have you seen this person's question? Have you seen that? And it's hard to encapsulate answers in just a YouTube reply comment. And cover everything and the essence of the answer. And it's really, I feel more connected to the audience, don't you? It's nice just to have a chat.
Absolutely. And I'm often, if I'm replying to people on Facebook, if there's anybody out there who gets my replies, I may be going from one meeting to another because I've got a day job and this sort of fits in around it and within it. I know there's been a couple of people came back to my invitation on Facebook to this. I don't know if they're in the chat or watching, but there's a couple of questions there. I'll be a little bit cryptic. I think the answer is, well, we're trying to get that in place and hope to come back with something soon on that.
Comms is important. Comms is important to us, and we know that comms is a major thing for the community and our channel members as well. So yes, 100%. XJet says don't forget to flush, Graham.
I get flushed all the time.
And Will, thank you very much for joining us on your first show.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Hopefully you'll come on again.
My brain has kind of just exploded with all this new. The trickiest thing has been these acronyms. I think I'm going to have a class with you, Sean, and go
steady
translate. So, yeah,
it's gone.
I charge for that. But there you go.
Yeah. Got to get over some of these tongue twisters.
Yeah, no, indeed. Excellent. Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you all coming along to see us. I really do appreciate it. And we will see you next time on Geeksvana Live. We've got some fantastic content coming around the corner. I always forget to say what's coming up, including a follow-up interview with Andy Harding from the MPCC Counter Drones, who is the team leader, the head of that team. It was some really, really fascinating stuff coming up, including interactions with police for drone flyers. So much content from that one interview, and we've got lots of other stuff coming up as well, including next week we're going to be having an exclusive look at the new Drone Assist app. We're going to be launching it here on the channel as a bit of an exclusive thing, including a follow-up with a live show where the Altitude Angel guys are actually coming down to chat to us all about a few ideas and also the new app. So I'm really looking forward to all of that. We'll see you soon on Geeksvana. Bye-bye.